This episode is brought to you by the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. Go to AAOMC.org and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic. All right, welcome back to the Corrected View podcast. And this is a show about ortho-k. It's a show about myopia control. And it's a show about the people who are devoted to its role in specialty care. And I have three amazing eye care providers with me today because, oftentimes in our industry, we have a lot of great conversations. And that was kind of my inspiration for starting this podcast was I know a lot of cool people. They talk a lot about a lot of great topics. And why don't I bring this to a larger audience? And that's the motivation and the inspiration for our episode tonight. And so first I want to go ahead and introduce our guests. I'm going to start with each one of our guests is from a different generation. We're going to start with Caroline Cauchi. If you don't know Caroline, she is the creator and driving force behind the AAOMC's boot camp for newcomers at Vision by Design. She's also the fellowship chair of the International Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. And she's a board member and a fellow. Caroline, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right. And then I also have Dr. Cheryl Chapman. She's going to be representing the Gen X generation here. She's our brand new vice president, which is awesome. She's also a fellow. She practices out of Nebraska. Cheryl, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, representing our millennial generation is Dr. Leah Johnson. And Leah is an internationally recognized speaker on myopia control, and she was just recently recognized by Vision Monday as one of the most influential women in the optical industry. Leah, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so today's topic, all right? Here's what I love about today's topic is pre-COVID, I'm going to meetings, and I'm starting to notice this trend, okay? And this trend is that optometry is becoming dominantly female. With each graduating class, I keep hearing how more and more of the graduating class of up-and-coming optometrists are women. And then I hear the same argument about how myopia management, myopia control is the future of optometry. And so it occurs to me that we are at a very critical point of the leadership of our industry. We're at this inflection point where women are poised to change optometry for the better using myopia management. And that's why I wanted to have each one of these amazing badass women onto this program, because each one of them are amazing at what they do. All three of them are leaders, and all three of them are perfect to speak on this topic. So I want to start with Caroline. So Caroline, this topic, as I mentioned before the episode started, this goes back to years ago when we first started working together. And I was hearing stories from you about what it was like to be a woman in the optometry industry and to go to meetings. And it sounded creepy, scary, horrific to me. And I was wondering, if we could just go around and get everybody's perspective on where we've come, how things have changed, and where we're going. So Caroline, if you could enlighten us as what was it like being a woman optometrist back in the day?
Back in the day. Well, back in when I first applied to optometry school, that was in 1975. Yes, I know most of you weren't born then. Okay, let's go with that. All right, fine. So I applied. And I applied to UC Berkeley and another school that I won't name. I got into UC Berkeley. I didn't get into the other school. Why do you think that is? Well, think about it. And I heard straight out that they weren't taking women yet. Okay, fine. So I get into UC Berkeley, that old slacky school, whatever. And there were 7 women in my graduating class, 58 guys. But UC Berkeley, we weren't treated like women. You were a doctor, and that's all there was. There was no kind of prejudice. There was just one professor who kept doing sexist comments about why don't you go back to the kitchen and the whole bit. And when you're in school, you can't do anything about that. You just have to suck it up. And it's okay, whatever. And then later, when I got out and actually traveled with him on in a big Winnebago down to another conference, I sat quietly and explained to him how he was a white guy, blonde hair, wasn't fat, wasn't ugly, didn't miss any teeth, the whole bit. And you don't have the right to say those kind of things to people unless you've walked in our shoes. And he had never thought about it that way, and he stopped. And then that's how we've always had to do it. You can't attack someone and say, don't do that, because they won't pay attention to you. But if you do it in a logical way, it's fine. So, got out of school, and then came the real interesting part, because up in the Bay Area, I didn't have any problem getting a job, but we moved down to San Diego. And it was really hard to get a job because they would look at me and say, we don't think a woman would fit in the practice. And it's like, you can't say that. But of course, how could I prove that they said that? And so I just finally found a job where someone took me in, and then I ended up buying my own practice, which was fine. But the real shocker comes when I go to my very first meeting, my very first society meeting. So I walk in the doors, this is in San Diego, and there is a sea of guys. There's about 40 guys. That was a really long time ago. Okay, so there are a lot more now, but there weren't. And they looked at me like, okay. And then what do you do? I mean, I don't know anybody. And so I tried to, suck that up, and I went, hello, I'm Dr. Cauchi. And they would say hello, and then they'd turn away and talk to their friends. No one would talk to me. It's like, okay, this is really uncomfortable. So I sat down and listened to the presentation, and then never went back for about 3 or 4 years. And finally there were women in the room, and I was more known at that point. And so then people would talk to me, but it's really uncomfortable, and you just have to be brave and kind of step into it. And the contrast, of course, I went to all sorts of other meetings, and same kind of thing, literally a sea of 1,000 men, and there might be 3 women. Not comfortable, but you just sit down and listen, and I'm not there to socialize anyway, so I would just get my education, and it wasn't a party. But what was very interesting was, about probably 15 years ago, I went to my first, at the time it was called an OAA, the Ortho-Keratology Academy of America, and now it's got so many other letters. And I walked in, and people were actually nice to me. And there weren't that many women in the room, but they were nice to me. They were friendly, they were welcoming, and it was a very different circumstance. And that was 15 years ago, when they were still being a little bit weird at the other meetings, but not bad. By then it had gotten a lot better. That was like probably 2000, 2005. It was much better, but back in the 80s, yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of fun. So
Yeah,
that's my experience.
I remember that moment, because I was there when you signed up to be on the OAA board of directors. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I feel like the general theme among practitioners was, why would a woman want to be on the board of an organization like this? Because women don't tend to, go into private practice because they want to start families, and they got to take care of babies. And even at the time, I was like, whoa, okay, well, that's all right. Well, that's not right. Like, Cheryl, from your perspective, you coming up in optometry school, and the differences between generations, because you're a new board member and our new vice president. I mean, how do you react to what Caroline said?
It's amazing. It's amazing to hear these stories, because that wasn't that long ago. But even by the time I went to optometry school, and I graduated in 2003, even by the time I went to optometry school, it had shifted. And you were starting to have more females entering optometry school than males. And I remember at the time hearing all this talk about, oh my gosh, there's so many females now. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, no big deal. Of course, whatever, right? Like, it didn't matter to me. It just seemed like pretty normal. And then when I hear stories about like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was not that long ago. But this makes me think about when I, first graduated and started going to meetings, how there were many more men in the room then, even than there are now. And a lot of it's because they've just aged out, they've retired, or they've passed on, or whatnot. And the whole vibe is different. The whole vibe is very, very different now. And at the time, looking back, I always thought it was just, well, it's because I'm new. Like, I never really thought it's because I'm female. I always thought it's because I knew and they all know each other and I don't. But I can't imagine compounding with that with they all know each other plus they're all the same gender. Like that would make it so much more uncomfortable and awkward. And yeah, I mean, just like having Caroline be brave enough to go and to continue like trailblazing what she did, to make a path for the rest of us. It's really interesting because one time my husband made a comment, he would rather have a female doctor than a male doctor. And I kind of stopped and I said, really? Why? And he said he just prefers the way the female doctors that he's had in the past communicate with him over the male doctors that he's had. And of course, that's a generalization. And I know some male doctors who are excellent communicators. But yeah, if he didn't know anything else about a doctor and he had to pick one or the other, he would pick a female doctor, which I thought, was really interesting perspective coming from a man, Caroline.
Well, yeah, just to jump in real quickly on that,
definitely.
In my exit interview from Berkeley, the doctor sat down and said, you know how to do all this and but I have to give you one bit of information, feedback. You're too nice to your patients. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go try and figure out how to be mean now. And it's because he just didn't have that much experience with how women talk to their patients. And so he was trying to help me out. And I ran into him many years after that. And I said, you know how you told me I could never succeed because I was too nice to my patients? And I said, yeah, I said, you were wrong.
That's probably why they come back to you, right?
Definitely. Leah, what is your perspective? Because, you're part of the new generation of eye care providers who, the more millennials I meet, who are in the eye care industry, it's like more and more of them don't, in my personal experience, don't want to settle for a standard optical practice. They want challenges. They want more time with the patient. They want to make a bigger difference. So I was hoping you could kind of speak to that based on, what we've heard so far, because now women are dominant in optometry school. From what I've heard, I don't know the exact statistics, but I mean, visually at meetings, like it's clear as day. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, well, I was reflecting back, and wow, I just want to say, Caroline, you've paved the path for all of us other female optometrists or female students to go to school and become optometrists and have an easier path. And I was thinking, I graduated in 2014, and about my class, it was probably 80% female and 20% male. And even I'm from the University of Houston, and going back to the school in the past few years, working in the clinic there, I think now it's probably even 90% female, and I would say 10% male. And I'm using that because our graduating classes are usually of 100 students at University of Houston. And so I'm thinking about, how many males there actually are in clinic. But I think that, and I'm not sure if this is just my generation. Well, I do know for millennials, a lot of them, they can't sit down and like do one thing, right? Or that's what the stereotype for millennials. We're always like hopping, we're the ones, we don't have a job for 40 years and we retire. We're like doing something, then we switch jobs. And when you're an optometrist, you have your degree and you paid a lot of money and have a lot of debt and for that degree. So you can't really just switch jobs. But I know that a lot of my classmates are different, even newer graduates, they want to do a mix between private practice, working in industry, perhaps, working as an associate doctor. And I've had some of them tell me they're looking for, a variety of different ways to practice optometry.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like, and this is kind of what I was trying to say at the beginning of the episode, is like, I feel like this is our opportunity to speak directly to female optometrists and to show that through the examples that the three of you have set and are currently setting, why should an optometrist go into myopia management, and why is it so important? And Cheryl, I want to start with you, because you're like I said, you're our new vice president. You're part of the leadership structure of our organization. So, why should an optometrist, especially a female optometrist, be considering myopia management?
Well, apparently all we're going to have left is female optometrists. So somebody better do it. But realistically, I think it's really important for female optometrists to be thinking about this because, a lot of the decision makers in the families with these kids who are progressive myopes, a lot of times it's the mom. And I think the way that we are able to communicate with these other mothers, because a lot of us are mothers, and not all, but the way that we can communicate with them, I think makes them feel more comfortable with regards to this, because myopia management is still very new. The consumer is just not extremely familiar with it. And if they can feel more of a connection with us, then I think that's really helpful. I think it's helpful when I'm talking to my patients and I can give examples of my own children who do myopia management and orthokeratology. I think that's very, very helpful. So from that perspective, I think just the communication aspect. But I think also, I'm not entirely joking. If our profession really is moving towards mostly female, well, we need these female optometrists to jump on board, because if we have so many myopes out there who are progressing, who's going to take care of them if we don't?
Right. And Caroline, you crafted boot camp into the state that it is. I know that there have been other people that have contributed, but it's been your baby. And so, I mean, one could say you are, and the other doctors working in boot camp are crafting future myopia management specialists. So like, what does it take for someone who's interested in myopia management? If there's an optometrist out there and she's considering it, what does she need to do? Like, what's the important first step?
I think the important first step is to have a plan. You just can't do this by the seat of your pants, because it won't be nice. It won't be well put together. You want to sit down and make a business plan, just like you do anything. And you want to put a timetable down of behaviors you have to accomplish. You have to know what kind of money is going to be involved in this. What instruments do you need to procure that you don't have in your office, and how are you going to fund that? How are you going to fund anything? How are you going to train your staff? You have to have a business plan. And once you have the business plan and you attach to it deadlines, because if you don't do deadlines, it's not going to get done. You're going to, I have a nice little business plan and then I put it over there and you forget about it. It's like, this is timely. You don't want to miss the boat. And so you want to have your business plan with your deadlines, and you want to make them achievable, but you also want to make them rapid, and then go through there, get your loans if you have to, or, smile at friends and have them give you money, whatever, to buy the equipment. But, get yourself a plan. And then once you have that, start training your staff, because everybody has to be on board with this, not just on board, but incredibly excited about it, because you can have your plan, but if your staff are like, what is this? Huh? Yeah. They're not going to help you put your plan together. So you got to have your backup team there. And I think that's where it is. And then of course, getting educated at places like boot camp, because with boot camp, we know that why would you want to recreate the wheel? You don't know what you're doing anyway. So just watch boot camp, and then we'll tell you what to do, and then go from there.
Leah, I want to go to you next, so that you get definitely take us away.
I wanted to jump in. I just wanted to say that, and I was just putting these pieces together, but I don't think I would have my job or be as involved in myopia management if it weren't for your boot camp, Caroline, that I went to in 2015. VBD was in Houston. I remember the other resident, the cornea and contact lens resident, I was the fellow at University of Houston. We said, VBD's coming into town. FAAOMC is offering, I believe it was a free boot camp for the residents at the time. And so we said, hey, we're going to go. And my co-resident, we sat there and we learned for the first time. And for our curriculum back then, that was really my, I guess, real immersion into myopia management and ortho-k. And from there, 7 years later, it's just, it's expanded, and all of my passion started from that boot camp.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Definitely.
The VBD boot camp was my launch pad as well. And I'm listening to you, Leah, talk about how these millennials want, or the stereotypical millennial wants more variety, and they want to, change things up. Like myopia management was that for me. Like it reinvigorated everything that I loved about, taking care of people's eyes. And it easily surpassed everything else, became the most exciting thing that I do. I remember like boot camp, I'm like on the edge of my seat. I'm like writing, I'm taking notes. I'm totally engaged. Like I wasn't even tempted to, check my phone or whatever it is that people do during education when they're super bored. No, it's just riveting.
Definitely. And Leah, go ahead. You
I
definitely.
know I was going to say, changing it up definitely was myopia management for me as well. And I did a fellowship in cornea contact lens. So I actually worked with ophthalmology and scleral lenses. And I'm not going to, it's not that scleral lenses aren't exciting, and for different areas of practice, that is something new. I learned how to fit those. But what my passion was and what made me just happy and like opened up my heart, and I was like, I want to do this, was myopia management. And we can, as optometrists, we can kind of be a jack of different specialties, but myopia management is definitely something that my passion and my heart is just so happy and full when we get to practice and share about it to our patients, to other practitioners as well.
That's awesome. And I wanted to bring that up, is that you not only see patients, but you also work extensively with other doctors. And so, what are the common obstacles that are facing the modern optometrist? Because the practice structure is different from what it used to be through each generation. And so, Leah, I was wondering if you could speak on that. Is like, what is the modern, for the modern optometrist, what is she facing these days as an obstacle to getting into myopia management?
Well, I think when you first get out of, optometry school, you're like, I got to pay off my loans, my student debts, I got to get a job. Some people, as Caroline had mentioned, they had a business plan. Some of my classmates knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they started their own private practice. I, on the other hand, I wasn't so sure. I started working as an associate doctor at a private practice. And I realized that while I wanted to implement myopia management, the doctors that I worked with didn't have the instruments. They didn't have a topographer, and they weren't really sure about, implementing myopia management. So I feel that for many new graduates, it's also, if you're working as an associate, you're trying to bring in this new, like, hey, I have these skills and I'd love to implement this. And then it's really up to that doctor and being a partner and saying, hey, can we train the whole staff? Or, oh my gosh, this is too much, like, to bring in, like, please just do your job and do your eye exams, and we'll talk about this, next year or something like that. So that's like one obstacle that I see from new graduates. But another one is also, I have other doctors who they are associates, and they say, my doctor wants me to bring myopia management into my practice. Leah, can you help me? How do I get started? And then it's really like, okay, there's the fitting aspect that, you can learn, but then there's the whole practice management aspect of how do you really get the whole practice on board?
That's interesting to hear you say that, Leah, because as you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, yeah, but aren't there doctors who are looking for those grads who are trained in that and who want to do that? And so it's good to hear you follow up with that and say, we're at least getting there. More and more, we're starting to at least see myopia management at the main conferences. It never used to be anything that was offered. You had to seek out a specialty conference to find it. And I would say it's too basic, really, to get very far in the main conferences, but at least the ideas are being introduced. And I think that attendance is usually pretty good at those lectures.
So if you're saying it's too basic, and I don't want to throw any other meeting under the bus, because my point of view is like, we just need to get the word out. We need education. We need everybody talking about it, considering using it. Although I don't think every optometrist should do myopia management. If you don't want to do it, if it's not for you, you should refer your patients to someone who does. But Caroline, what is it going to take for to give the proper education, I guess is the way I'm trying to put it. But if we're just giving a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, then I feel like we're not serving the community as well as we can. So what can we do? What more can we do?
Well, I guess the thing is that in optometry, there are all sorts of optometrists. There are some that are very happy to work for private equity and just turn out the patients, real quickly and never do anything innovative and just make their money and get out. And then there are some that want to do something like myopia control, but they don't want to put the effort in. And so they just go and take these very shallow classes, and they, slap atropine on everybody, and that's because that's all they know, or they slap a soft contact on somebody because that's all they know, and they don't have the breadth of knowledge. And then there are the optometrists that really want to learn what they're doing completely, and not just do it, but know why they're doing it, and be able to have all the data to supply to their patients when the patients ask the questions. And that, I think that's the group that we have to target, because we can't make everybody be excellent. I would love to, but they're just people that aren't excellent, and they don't want to be excellent. They just want to have a job job. And the thing that I find amazing is that I'm getting to the end of my career, so to speak. I'm back there in the 70s. So I'm getting to the end of my career. But when people hear that I'm starting to cut back, they're coming to me and they're saying, you changed my life. You stopped, whatever I was doing, you got my child to not have their eyes get worse. And every single time I'm there at the office, they're crying, they're hugging me. It's COVID. Oh, well, they're hugging me because we made a difference. And that's the kind of people we're looking for, because when you come to the end of your life and people are saying that to you, not the end of your life, but your career, and they're saying that to you, you're saying that's a life well lived. That is what I was supposed to do to contribute to society. That's not how everybody is. I think that's how everybody should be, but they aren't. And so if you're the kind of person that really, really wants to look back on your career and say, you know what, this wasn't a job, it was a commitment to society, then you got to do it well. You can't just piddle around. You got to do it really well. And you can't do that in these hour quickie lectures. You got to delve in and not only do the boot camp thing, but then keep on studying and practicing and questioning and on and on.
This podcast is made possible by the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. If you want to learn how to do ortho-k, then we can teach you. If you're looking for a passionate community of like-minded experts, then consider becoming an AAOMC member. Or if myopia management just isn't your thing, that's okay too. Use the AAOMC online doctor search tool to refer your myopia management patients. For more information, visit AAOMC.org and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic. So, we're definitely looking for the difference makers, and those are the kind of women that we're trying to, speak directly to in this podcast. And Cheryl, as far as, because I remember, I remember past conversations about, myopia management, ortho-k, and I feel like, I don't want to start blaming generational things here, but I feel like the message before was, you have to do this because you've got to take care of these kids. We've got this myopia epidemic. 2050, half the world's population is going to be nearsighted. And I feel like we did ourselves a disservice, because I feel like you can't come in like Yosemite Sam and start shooting guns and telling people what to do. I think we have to make an argument that myopia management, ortho-k is really cool. You should be a part of it. And how do we transmit? What's the best way to transmit that message? What do you think?
That's a really good point that you bring up, Matthew. So I know every time you talk to me, probably I start talking about axial length, right? But this brings me back to our axial length conversations. Caroline, I see you laughing. Thank you. I know I'm stuck on axial length. But what's interesting is I feel like I'm not like Caroline. I haven't been here forever. I haven't seen myopia management from the ground up. I came in after, docs were already going with it, right? But I feel like I still was on the early end of adoption of using axial length to help monitor my patients. And that shocked me, right? So all these guys who are thinking that, they know tons about ortho-k and they've got just gobs of ortho-k patients. And I'm like, wait, they're not doing axial length. And I felt like when I came in and, was asking these questions, and then I finally got my axial length instrument, and I'm just like, geez, how are people not doing this? And I have a good friend here in Omaha, and I was talking to him, and I was like, dude, you got to do axial length. And he's like, nah, I don't know. Like, he's like, I think it's just a barrier. And that really helped me to see it a little bit differently, because I want everybody to measure axial length. And I want it so badly, but I don't want it to be a barrier for people to do myopia management. And I agree with Caroline. I don't want people just dabbling and piddling around in it and doing a poor job either. And so, I've tried to, like help with educating doctors and help get the word out for myopia management. But I am also trying not to be super pushy, like you have to do this. You have to spend this much money on an axial length measurement and a topographer. And, the dollar signs get too high, it is a little bit of a barrier. So when I talk to doctors about axial length, I like to tell them, work with the mentality that you're working towards the point where you can then afford that axial length instrument. And you will want it. Once you finally get it, you'll wish you had gotten it sooner, but like you can get started without it. But the point is you have to keep working and keep working and keep working, because we are learning new stuff all the time. New studies are coming out all the time. So at some level, understanding myopia management, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the doctor who wants to just go and punch his card and go home at the end of the night and not think about it anymore, because you do have to work somewhat hard, to stay on top of things. Before I ever became a doctor, I remember kind of growing up in this small town community where everybody just sort of always believes the doctor is always right. And I've noticed that now as a doctor with some of my elderly patients, like the doctor is always right. Like whatever you tell them, they'll do it. But then you have these younger generations of patients who are like, wait, but why? And tell me more. And what's the study on that? And it makes me realize that not all doctors stay on top of the new stuff. And not all doctors are right. So it just kind of, circle back. It's just, you can't force people. And we really do want the movers and the shakers who are really interested in always like bettering themselves and knowing the good stuff, to be the ones who are doing this, and to also know that they can get started without everything, but they should have that mentality of being willing to work towards always
throw
bettering
another thing out. As women, we have a natural advantage, and everybody knows that women are considered more believable. That's why they're all over TV when they're advertising drugs and things. They have a woman do it because we are viewed as more believable. Secondly, we work better. Not all guys are bad, but women just naturally have an advantage with kids because the kids think it's mommy's not going to hurt me. And so we have this advantage. We don't have to get the kid calm because some big guy is coming in and scaring them. What child has ever been scared of me? Never. None of us, and so fortunately we have some natural advantages, which makes it easier. So women, come on, take your advantage and run with it.
I think that was very well put. Definitely. Go ahead, Leah.
Oh, I was actually going to say I have, you can't really see. Anyways, I have this book here, Machiavelli for Women. And something that you said, Cheryl, actually reminded me of this, because in this book I was reading, it was saying that women don't, and this is, I'll bring it back to the point, but women don't ask or they won't apply for a new job position unless they feel that they are 100% or even higher qualified for that for that new job promotion. And men, actually, they did a study and they would apply for this new position or promotion when they were only 60% qualified. And so kind of tying this back into myopia management, I sometimes feel that us women as a practitioner, you want to make sure everything is perfect in your office before you really launch myopia management. And you're like, I need to be 100 to 150% prepared for myopia management. And while it is good to have a plan, we also need to say, hey, let's try to act now. And maybe if we don't have all the equipment, we'll do what we can. And as we can build the business to then future incorporate, the axial length biometer into the office. Once you see 10 ortho-k patients, then you can say, hey, come back in. We're going to, take a axial length measurement on you.
Well, it just brings it all back to Caroline, how, she said you have to put deadlines on it, right? Like, okay, by this date, we're going to do this. By this date, we're then going to do this. And by this date, we're then going to do this, and keep working towards it. But so I had a patient in today, and I've seen her for years. She has 3 kids now. When I started seeing her, she was a teenager. Like, she's grown up with me. She's like a minus 575. Her axial length's over 26 millimeters long. We're talking about this. Her oldest kid is 4. And so I'm always thinking, can I talk to my patients about myopia management? Heck yeah. So she's like, I'm telling her, oh, your prescription's the same. She's like, oh, thank goodness, it used to change all the time. And I'm like, I know, I watched it change. I'm like, by the way, you have little kids now, you should know, we don't have to just watch it change anymore. There are things that we can do. So I'm planting that seed. So I talked to her about, like, let's get your kids in earlier rather than later so we can start getting baselines, and she's all over that. So you can definitely market these things all the time in every conversation that you have with your patients.
Matt,
Yes.
something that you had said earlier before about, how it used to be, how we were saying, hey, we need to start implementing myopia management by 2050, 50% of the world population will be, will have high myopia. Here's a picture of, a choroidal detachment or myopic maculopathy. And this is what's going to happen. I believe when I started in industry about 5 years ago, that was kind of the message. And I feel that, and I'd like to hear other people's opinion, but it's kind of grown or shifted into more of a lifestyle. Like, hey, as a child, you're going to have clear vision 24/7, and you're going to be able to do all these things, and go swimming and play baseball or gymnastics and not worry about these things. And it's going to give you much better quality of life. And as a side note, we'll also be able to slow down, myopia progression, and we're going to monitor this as well.
That's awesome. Cheryl, do you agree with the messaging? Caroline, also, if you anything to add, jump right in.
I was going to say that there are data that parents don't really care that much about the pathology part of it. They do, but that's not their priority. Their priority is their child going to get a job? Is their child going to be picked for the A team? Is their child going to be, doing all these sport things and not be discriminated because they wear glasses? They care about that social issue as opposed to the pathology.
Yeah, another patient I had this morning, his mom was kind of like, I don't know if we want to keep doing ortho-k. He keeps giving us a hard time about it. We've broken 2 molds in the last 2 months. Like, it's expensive, and replacing those molds. And I'm like, all right, well, do you want to do soft daytime lenses? And she looks over at him. She goes, what do you think? You want to do, like, because I was like, we can still do myopia management with other options. And she's like, well, you would have to wear lenses during the day. And he was like, no. Like, she's like, okay, buddy, well, Dad and I'll pay for this for you, but you got to be on board and quit giving us a hard time. And I'm like, I'm just sitting back, like, letting them have this conversation. And when presented with the idea of wearing daytime correction, he's a baseball player. He doesn't want to get dust in his eyes with that contact lens in his eye. So then all of a sudden he was totally on board again.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think back to, I think it was actually Carrie that said this, my father. He said that the OG generation of optometry dropped the ball, that they weren't doing enough for the patient, and I'm summarizing here, I'm not quoting him directly, but the idea was that, like, if you're just seeing your patient and saying, okay, well, your vision got a little bit worse, here's your new prescription, I'll see you next year. It felt like it was just letting the patient down. And that myopia management, ortho-k, was specifically an opportunity to kind of pick the ball back up and run with it and do better for that patient. And I feel like that's a conversation that's it's easier to have, I want to say, than in the past. Leah, would you agree with that at all?
Yeah, I think that, with the new information, right, and technology, everyone can easily look something up on their phone, even if they haven't heard of it. And they can be like, are you giving me the latest? As my doctor, are you going to be offering me these latest treatments? Even if I don't want it, I want you to, I still deserve that right to know about all of my options. And so one of the practices that I used to work at, we would have this sign in the break room, and I can't remember exactly what it said. But the general idea was you always offer all your treatment options to all your patients, no matter how they look or, what you think their preconceived notions are going to be. And so that was, our reminder in our office to, not drop the ball and to, speak to every patient about all their options.
So then I want to say, if this is an opportunity to pick the ball back up, which is what I think is happening. I think women are poised right now. Female optometrists are in a position now to make a huge change. I think we're seeing this in every industry. Women are definitely stepping up and are going to be changing the world for the better, in my opinion. But so I want to kind of put the spotlight on what is the future of optometry, because I keep hearing that like ophthalmology is starting to get more interested in myopia management. I had Brianna Rue on this episode, and she said, look, optometry should be doing ortho-k. That should be an optometrist thing. So Caroline, I want to start with you. What do you think the future is going to look like? Are we going to lose ortho-k, to ophthalmology? Is this, I keep hearing every year pre-COVID that we're just going to get thousands of people coming to Vision by Design, and our numbers get better and better every year, but I'm still waiting for that pivotal moment where I see thousands of women coming through the doors ready to do this. So what does the future look like in your opinion? Where are we at?
Well, I think the future is here now. We're just stepping right into it because it is becoming more known, and it's becoming fortunately more mainstream, partly because industry has gotten their claws on it and they're willing to put some money into it. Before, we had no way to spread the word except for us with our small voices. Now we've got social media and we have money behind us from the industry. And I think that's making a huge difference. And so the future looks really good in terms of that. Now, there's always going to be people that are going to take the easy way out and not do that. And, the same thing with contact lenses. It started out very special, and then a whole lot of people came doing it. And now it's at Walmart and all these other places, and it's no big deal. But there are still those of us who fit the special contact lenses, and we stand out. And this is just, I think, what we have to convey to women and everybody is that this is a way to protect yourself from private equity, from working at Walmart or Kmart or whatever mart it is, because that's really not that comfortable a place to be. And it, during all this time that I practiced, there were recessions, there were depressions, there was all sorts of stuff. And through all that time, we had a good practice. We made an income. And why is that? Because we were doing something different. And that's what myopia control and ortho-k is. It's something different. And if you want to have that security of knowing that you aren't going to be just a number and you aren't going to come and go and lose your job and have to work, as a bagger in the grocery store, do something to protect yourself and also have a whole lot of fun, because ortho-k is fun, especially because it's kids, and kids are fun. They're funny. They're silly. Hey, let's smile a little bit in these sort of depressing times. So I think the answer is that that with industry's help, everybody's going to know more about it, and we're going to be poised to deliver it.
I agree. It's a matter of time. Like, the momentum is such now that there's no way to stop it. And those doctors who don't want to do it, that's fine. They need to keep doing what they deem most appropriate. But if they want to get on board with this and they're not willing to do it themselves, they will have hopefully opportunities to hire new grads, probably female, according to the numbers, new grads that are willing to do it and well trained to do it. So I do think it is just a matter of time, in my mind, hopefully sooner rather than later, because I'm already ready. I'm already doing it. For doctors who aren't already doing it, like, we need to get them going as fast as we can and as competently as we can, so that they're ready for when those floodgates open. Because once it starts going really viral in parent friend groups and communities, like, people are just going to seek it out like no other.
Well, and the other thing that that Leah was saying that made me think about it is that, a lot of women doctors start out working as associates. And if an associate goes to the boss and with a plan and says, hey, I want to make your practice better, and I want to do it by doing this, and this is how we could do it. What do you think? There are some doctors who are very narrow-minded. They'll say, yeah, next year. But a lot of them might say, oh, I think I picked the right associate. She is trying to make my practice better, and that's valuable. And why not? Let's try it. But you have to have the courage to put yourself out there to your boss and say, hey, what about it? Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They don't do it. Oh, well.
Definitely.
Not everybody is as brave as you, Caroline.
Leah, what is it going to take? I mean, you're on the cutting edge of this because, like I said earlier, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this podcast is, you're working with doctors all the time, not just seeing patients. And so what is it going to take to get that message across? And do you agree with what Cheryl and Caroline
I was
said?
going to say, I definitely agree with what, Cheryl and Caroline have said, but I, and it's like, oh gosh, what is it going to take? I mean, public awareness is one where, we are trying to spread the word within, each of ourselves as an optometrist into our small communities. But, industry has now, they have the Global Myopia Coalition, which is a group of industries, and they're trying to spread public awareness. I think working with big groups, the American Academy of Optometry and the American Academy of Ophthalmology. And we don't want to give up our right to treat myopia and to manage myopia. But, all these other groups are now saying, hey, I just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some ophthalmologists who were interested, in ortho-k. And I was so surprised. I actually walked in a little bit nervous because, I was like, what are they going to, what are they going to say? But so, and it's going to take action, just acting now of getting over your fear and saying, hey, as optometrists, we can do something now to change the trajectory of these children's lives. As Caroline mentioned, you can change a child's life, and contribute to society. And I think it's, having this group concerted effort as well, that we're all, even within my dad's an optometrist, so I kind of remember optometry rivalry, right, in the small town that we were in. But it's saying we're working together. There's enough children to go around that all have myopia, and we can all help treat them in whatever modality is for their lifestyle. And just optometrists getting on board with it and saying, you can start simple, and you can build up from there. If you want to start with a soft dual focus lens, and that's at your capacity. And then you can say, after I get a little bit of myopia management under my belt, I'll move on to, more complex okay fitting.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think like one of the messages that I've taken to heart from, because I love my job. I get to work with optometrists like the three of you. AAOMC members are like my favorite people in the world. And I think one of the most consistent messages I hear is that usually that individual, she does not just want to sit with the status quo. She's someone who wants to do more, to do better in her practice and be challenged. And so I think the way I want kind of wrap things up here, and Caroline, we'll start with you, is I want you to look at this like you're able to go back in time and give yourself a message when you're starting your myopia management journey, you're doing ortho-k or whatever the case may be. And I want you to think of, a message that you could give past you to, about maybe something, mistake or success or whatever, some sort of message you could transmit to that younger self to say like, this is a grind, you got to keep going, or, the future will be beneficial in this area for you. And this is the message you want to transmit. What do you think that would be?
I have a regret, and the regret is that I didn't have the courage to turn my practice into a pediatric only practice because I was afraid. And I was just afraid I'm not going to have enough patients. I'm not going to be able to do it. And in retrospect, I would have had a whole lot more fun, even though I love my adult patients, but I really, really love my kid patients. And it's really scary to do something like that. and if I could go back, I probably would, and I would have just sucked up the loss of income if there was a loss of income, because that's what I was afraid of. Because it's like, how are they going to find out? But yeah, I guess sometimes women tend to not have as much courage as men because we don't have the same testosterone or something. But yeah, put on your big girl panties and try it out.
All right. And speaking to what you just said, it's like, and this is my opinion and my opinion alone based on my own life experience, is that like, I feel like men have grown up in a culture of access and encouragement to take the shot. And I think this speaks to what Leah was saying earlier about how, in some cases, a female optometrist would want to make sure that she's 150% ready to go. Whereas, in my own personal experience, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but in my own personal observation, it's like I live in a culture of access and encouragement to take the shot, right? You see that opportunity, you try for it. You see that beautiful woman at the bar, you go and you buy her a drink. And it's this culture of just like, go for it, take the chance. Who cares if you're not ready? Just go do it. So, I just exactly what you just said, spoke to me in that instance. Cheryl, same question for you, and then we'll end with Leah. If there was one message you could send back to, past self who's contemplating getting into myopia management, what would it be?
So I was kind of like already settled into my practice. My practice was doing well. It was cash flowing. And so for me, making a big change was scary. Because I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to jump in with both feet, and I'm going to like really spend a lot of time and effort on this. I'm going to, purchase new equipment. And, I guess I do have the advantage over, you kind of putting guys down a little bit here, Matthew. I'm going to stick up for guys a little bit here. Some guys are the primary breadwinner, and that's more scary, right? If you don't have a spouse who's also working. I think a lot of female optometrists have a spouse who's also working, which should give us even more freedom to make these choices and these business decisions. And so I would just tell myself, don't be afraid. Don't lose sleep over this. Don't have stress over this. You're going to love it. It's going to change your life for the better. I love my job. My kids always talk about, none of them so far wants to be an optometrist, which is so weird to me, but they will frequently comment, I don't think I want to be an optometrist, but I hope I can find a job that I love as much as mom loves her job. And it's really truly mostly because of myopia management, I'll be honest. And so I would just, if I could give my former self, if I could go back in time and give myself a message, I would say, just don't be afraid. Just do it.
I love it. Yeah. And as the offspring of an optometrist who multi-generational practice and didn't take up the family reins, I'm sure my father feels your pain at the moment.
No pain. It's fine. As long as they love their job, right?
That is a similar, I feel very lucky to have, several very independent and powerful women, very outspoken women in my life ever since I was a child, my mom being the first, of course. And, there was always this message being transmitted to me by both of my parents that like, if you don't love it, you shouldn't be doing it. If you have the advantage of opportunity and access that I do, because obviously there are people who are less fortunate and don't have that. But they're like, if you're not in love with it, if you don't have a passion for it, then don't do it. And that's why I stayed away from being an optometrist. I enjoy working with optometrists, definitely way more than I wanted to be one, for sure. All right. And Leah, definitely close us out here. It's like you are in a position where we're going to be looking to you and Cheryl and Caroline in different lights and for different guidance and leadership. So what is the message that you could send back to your younger self to say, as far as what you're currently looking at, what you're currently experiencing?
I think that my message I would send back to my younger self and to other future or female millennial optometrists is just to find a mentor. Women, we're in this community where we are happy to help someone and to raise them up and to share, what Caroline or Cheryl has gone through, with that newer generation female doctor who's like, hey, I want to start myopia management, and to not be shy. I tend to, be like, oh, well, I can't ask Caroline. She's, the professor of teaching boot camp, but, and it's like, reach out to those people and find your mentor and find someone who you really can look up to and ask them the questions. And so that will help you, skip some of those pitfalls that they've had to learn and to help you become more successful. And also to partner with industry. Industry can help support, practices in so many ways, and to not be shy to reach out to, that company that you prefer working with and saying, hey, I want to really build my practice. They also want you to build your practice too.
Definitely. Very, very well said. All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Unless there's anything else that anybody wants to add, then we'll just go with the end of the episode. So if you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you did, these are the kind of conversations I have with these amazing women all the time. And Leah's right. Find a mentor. And if you're looking for a great group of folks, you couldn't do worse, or you couldn't do better, I should say. I'm sorry. You couldn't do better than the AAOMC, the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. And so if you liked this content, if you want to reach out, if you want to get started, go to AAOMC.org and click on the practitioner button. Look into becoming a member. We have an intro free membership that if you just want to come in, see what things are like, ask some questions, talk with some experienced optometrists who are myopia management badasses, then go ahead and do that. And then if you want to consider becoming a full member, just like these women on this podcast who give their actual real life money to support this organization because they believe in it. They believe in this future. They believe in myopia management. They want to give back to the rest, of us in that industry. All right. So if you have any questions about this podcast or any others, thecorrectedview@gmail.com. And I want to thank Dr. Caroline Guerrero Cauchi, Dr. Cheryl Chapman, and Dr. Leah Johnson. I love having you guys on. I've been wanting to do this episode for so long. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience and your vision for the future.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of The Corrected View. And if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to thank the standard members of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, whose annual dues and support make it possible for the AAOMC to put out education, awareness, and content like this. I'd also like to give a special shout out that I'm going to be giving out at the end of every Corrected View episode for 1 full year. And that shout out goes to Dr. Somi O for her very generous contribution at the lifetime member level of our fundraiser. Thank you to everyone who contributed and keeping the AAOMC alive. You are awesome.